Alright guys, I'm gonna do a little story time here, I guess. I don't want to copy farming or fixing or any of the other guys that do story time. But this is a story I promised Ford Farmer the other day. I want to say it was probably the night before his accident with the chainsaw cutting down a tree. I had told him a little bit about my accident that I had had when I was cutting down trees. And I told him that I would do a story on that one of these days. And what better day than today? It is currently 14 below zero. It is 10 to 9 at night. And it is 45-50 degrees in the shop. So I am going to do a little bit of a story here about my tree accident. I had bought my north land. See, my farm here is 82 point whatever acres. And 4 or 5 years ago, I had bought the 35 acres to the north of me. And that summer, I farmed it, and then we were in a drought. And all the swamp over there was dry. So that fall, I fenced the perimeter of it. So back then I had intentions that I was going to put cattle in the swamp over there. And now we were in a drought for the first 2 years. Yeah, I've had it at least 4 years, because then these last 2 years it's been so wet that it looks like a lake over there. But I had big intention when I bought the land that I was going to fence all the swamp, thin all the woods out, and put my steers over there. That way I could have my cow-calf group at home on these pastures. I could rotationally graze them. And then over in the swamp, I had intentions I was going to build a corral over there for load out. I was going to put a feed trough in there so I could grain them every day. And I was going to have a water trough in there, so I'd water them in there. And they would go in and out of this corral every day. So when fall come around and I was going to load out to ship, they were used to going in there. They come in for their grain one day. I close the gate, back a trailer up, and we're ready to go, load them up, and away we go. But in the process of fencing, there was one tree that was in the way of me running my wire. And if you look at it, it was like 5 tree trunks in a row that I don't want to say they all came out of the same stump, and how you'll have a tree with like 2 to 5 trunks coming out of one stump. It didn't look like that. It looked like 5 trees maybe coming out of the same root. And these trees, they're probably 24-inch diameter trees. And they were basically, the stumps were right next to each other, like they're all come out of the same root. Almost like, I don't remember if the tree was a locust or if it was a black ash. A lot of the trees in my swamp over there are a veneer ash tree. They're worth money. And my intentions were to go back out and log that out with a skid loader, because there's people that want that black ash for flooring and everything else. And I did log that, I think it was that first winter after my tree accident. But needless to say, I'm going to show you on my map right here of this 35 acres and show you exactly where I was working and what happened. I'm going to explain to you what happened. So here is my FSA map of my 35 acres over there. And right in this corner, I set that corner post, but about where the blue line is, there is where these 5 trees are in a row. And the last tree trunk the wire would run right through the center of it. So I dropped that tree on the ground, and I fell the tree. It was sitting there, and the tree had been on the ground for a couple minutes. I was determining where to cut the trunk. A neighbor of mine, he has a bunch of draft horses, and I was going to have him skid out these logs out of the swamp for me with the horses, because I was nervous about taking the skid loader in there. And this is before I had the tracks, my Trailblazer tracks for it. So in the process of me standing there looking at it, trying to determine how long to cut this tree trunk, another branch from the tree next to it, or wherever it was up above me. A tree fell. I'm gonna flip you guys back so you can see me again. I was standing there looking at the tree laying on the ground, and I had the chainsaw running in my hand. I was determining how long I was gonna cut it, whether I was gonna cut it 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet, whatever. And the next thing I know, I wake up on the ground, disoriented, everything's spinning. I could not feel anything from here down, my whole right arm. The chainsaw was not running, so I don't know how long I laid there. But when and the phone's gonna ring in the middle of this. I have to call him back. When I came to, I could not feel anything in my right hand. I couldn't move it. The chainsaw was not running. My head didn't really hurt, but I was seeing stars. But when I came to and was trying to figure out exactly what was going on, I was laying on my back, but kind of on my side, on the shoulder. And when I was coming to, I was looking around trying to figure out what the heck had happened. Well, here next to me was a tree branch about 12-inch diameter and about 15 foot long. It looked like a damn tree that landed on me. Needless to say, it wasn't a dead limb either. It broke off after the other tree had fell. But it just missed my ear and caught me right on top of the shoulder and then come down, because I have a scuff mark all the way down my arm, but there's an indent right here, right on top of my shoulder where it landed, and it took me out. And when it hit, there's your nerves that go down your shoulder. It severed those nerves. So I only have, I don't know, it's not right to this day. My arm is still numb down through here. It's just, I'm used to it now. It's been 4 years. But when this happened, I couldn't work. I couldn't run the saw anymore. I couldn't hardly pick it up with that hand. I could hardly move the arm. And back then, I didn't have the Gator. I had my old Yamaha Moto 4. Throttle finger, I had to get back home from there on that four-wheeler. And I literally had to hold this hand up to get it on the throttle. And once I got on there, I could move my thumb, but I couldn't feel it. And then I come home like that. And of course, I come home and cracked open a can of Mountain Dew and debated on what I should do. By that time, my arm was starting to throb more, and I could move it, so I knew it wasn't broke. Didn't know whether it was fractured or anything. But this was 3 weeks before our rifle season, so it was in October, end of October. And I debated whether I should go to the doctor or not. And then I'm sitting there thinking, it's like, boy, we've got rifle season in 3 weeks. If for some reason, when that tree hit me here, if it cracked my collarbone or something up here, this is where I put my rifle when I shoot. If it cracked that, and all of a sudden I'm out deer hunting and I squeeze the trigger on that 7mm and it finishes breaking it, that ain't gonna be good. So I decided, I called my buddy Pig Farmer. I called him up and I said, hey, what are you doing? Or I texted him, I think it was, because I don't have cell phone service here. In the right spot in the yard I do. Otherwise, I can usually send text messages from most of the places here. I sent him a text message and I asked him what he was doing. And he's down getting milk or something for his mom. His mom has a daycare or whatever. He goes, "What's up?" I said, "Well, I need a ride when you get a chance." He said, "All right, well, I can deliver this milk or whatever, and where you got to go?" He said, "I need a ride to the hospital." "Oh, shit." He said, "I'll be right there." Well, he didn't. The milk didn't make it to his ma's. He took me to the hospital, and I had him drop me off at the back door. And I said, "Well, I'll catch a ride home with my wife." And my wife works at a hospital. And I walked all the way through the hospital up to the urgent care. And I stood there in line waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally the lady asked me what I was there for. And I said, "Well, I had a little accident." And she said, "Well, what's wrong?" I said, "Well, I had a tree fall on me." "You had a tree fall on you?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Where'd it hit you?" I said, "I have no idea." I said, "All I know is I woke up on the ground disoriented seeing stars." She told me, "Don't move, don't say another word, stay right where I am." All of a sudden there's bells and whistles and crap going off, and there's people running all over, and they put me on a stretcher and took me back into urgent care. Well, my wife was in an education class, and the head supervisor for the hospital come and got her, and she went into class, kneeled down next to her and said, "Your husband's here." "Okay, whatever." And she goes, "No, they call level 2 trauma on him." Well, of course, I'm in urgent care, and all of a sudden my wife shows up. That ain't a good thing. When you're married to a person in the medical field, anything medical related, you really hate when they're around, because it's, that's the way they are. But lo and behold, after they did CT scan and all this other stuff, I had a concussion. Somehow up in here, when the impact of it severed the nerves. And I don't really remember what else. All I know is he told me that I had bad arthritis, which, what else, added to the list of things that are wrong. But, so yeah, that was, then I had to ride home with her, and third degree the whole way home, and out cutting trees, nobody knows where you're at, and whatever. Thing is, when it's my time, the good Lord's gonna take me no matter where the heck I am. So I don't feel I need to tell anybody where I'm going. They'll find me eventually. And I was literally 20 feet from the road. And yeah, I might have been wearing dark clothes, but that chainsaw is bright orange, and somebody would have seen me eventually. But anyways, that's what happened to me. It can happen at any time, and I'll tell you what, since then, I look up a lot more. And when you're cutting a tree down, it used to be that I always was looking at what I was doing, which normally you pay attention to what you're doing. But anymore, when I'm cutting trees down, I don't stare at the chainsaw, or after I've got my notch in the tree and I'm doing the back cut, I don't sit and stare at the gap in the back cut to see what the tree is doing. Now I look up to see what the tree is doing. You kind of have to, be on your game and pay attention to both. But what I have found, it is easier to use felling wedges if you have any questionable doubt about which way the tree is going to fall. It's just as easy to use a felling wedge, and as you start doing your back cut, start putting it in your back cut, in the slot. So if the tree does decide to pinch, you've already got the felling wedge in there, and you can start pounding it in to unwedge your chainsaw. And normally, if the tree is going to come backwards and pinch your chainsaw, it's going to fall the wrong way. So if you use the felling wedges, you can force it the way you want it to go. That is kind of a pain in the butt sometimes if you're trying to fight the wind. But the felling wedge is the way to go, and not a steel felling wedge. I don't know of any steel felling wedges. There are splitting wedges that are steel, obviously, but you need to get a plastic felling wedge that if your chain hits it, you're not going to ruin your chain. But since then, I have 4 felling wedges with me all the time. I have my hatchet with a hammerhead on the back, 4 pounding them in, and I look up. It's one of those things that for a very long time after the accident happens, when you're sleeping at night, you have nightmares about it. Every time you cut a tree after that, your heart beats a little funny when you're cutting trees down for a while. And I have one other kind of traumatic thing that has happened to my life that me and my daughter and my wife went through. My wife not in the heat of what happened to me and my daughter. And that's another one of those things that when you're sleeping at night, you have nightmares about it for a very long time. And every time you see storm clouds coming, you think about it. And it's different after you go through something traumatic. Me and my daughter went through a tornado. And if we would not have been underneath the canopy at the gas station, hanging onto the front end of my 2001 Dodge Ram Cummins, we probably wouldn't be there anymore because I lost my hat. Everything that was in the back of my truck is gone, and it was replaced with a bunch of crap off of a house that was across the street, across the parking lot, and across railroad tracks. The roof that come off the old railroad depot, part of it ended up in the back of my pickup. Cuts on both sides of me. Yeah, it was weird. The video, you can see the calf hutches roll all the way across the parking lot past us, and then all of a sudden come back, and in that you can see my hat rolling with the calf hutches down at the local Cenex hardware store. So it's, you think about it more after something happens, and when it comes to felling trees, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I've never had a close encounter with a chain or anything. I'm usually pay close attention where the chain is. My first chainsaw, the clutch, inside the clutch there's a spring on a Husqvarna, and I'm pretty sure steel is the same way, but that spring contracts when the saw is at an idle, and then when you speed it up, the weights throw out, and that's what engages your clutch and takes off. Well, shortly after I had this Husqvarna, that spring broke. And it's a $2, $3, $4 spring, whatever, but I never fixed it. I just learned to pay attention where my chain was. And ever since running that saw for 3 or 4 years that way, it's just been instilled in my mind to keep an eye on where the chain is. You don't get the chain close to your leg or wherever else. Accidents happen, I know. So I've never had a close encounter with a chain. And after my tree accident, my wife and my mother-in-law and everybody else had to buy me headgear, had to buy me chaps, had to buy me all the stuff that I don't wear anyways because it's a pain in the ass. I'm constantly on and off the gator, constantly climbing up and down hills, and it just doesn't work. It's too hot. It's always impairing your ability to move. So the hard hat is fine, but I normally either wear sunglasses or safety glasses when I'm cutting, so the screen on there doesn't do me much good. And half time when you bend over, it falls off your head, so it doesn't do you any good. And normally when I'm cutting wood, it's right now when it's below freezing, it's cold, and that plastic hard hat on top of your head doesn't work. My headgear, as you can see right now, I have a summertime hat, which is bright to wear in the middle of winter. And as you can see, I just buzzed my head 3 days ago. But I don't like having long hair on top of my head, and as you can see, I shave too. You get used to the cold. It's not that bad. And if you're outside all the time in the cold, you have one of the best things that was ever invented. And it's called a rabbit fur hat, and it's the warmest thing you're ever going to put on your head. But that's normally what I wear when I'm cutting wood. And that's just a little story about my tree felling accident. It was about a week, and I was back cutting trees when nobody was around. My wife was coddling me like I was fragile and a piece of glass was going to break at any moment. So we had neighbors come help, neighbor kids or whatever, and I watched one throw a popple tree that was about 20-inch diameter and about 2 foot long into somebody else's head and take them out, and I'm sure they got a concussion out of it too. And I just figured, you know what, this is my deal, I'm going to take care of myself, and I went back to cutting my own firewood. And I normally do it myself. I don't really care for having anybody else out there with me to worry about or deal with or be in the way or whatever else. And normally I fell all the trees, and then I come back and cut them up, and I usually bring the skid loader, and I cut the trees, block them up, throw them in the bucket, I come back, I dump them at the stove, and then I go back out and grab the chainsaws and all my other stuff, and I'm done for the day. But But yeah, that's where it happened. I had to get back home from there by myself, and that's the twist of events that happened afterwards. But in touching on this, while I have the my map here, as you can see, this is my 35 acres to the north. I had mentioned I want to sell 12 acres, give or take. This is what I want to sell. This is about 2.5 acres of the field. All these woods are higher ground. This down here is all that veneer lumber. It's down in the swamp. This is kind of wetter. It's higher over here. This is high ground here with kind of like a water run coming down through here. And then there's 2 water runs that come this way. This is higher ground. It's a little bit higher over here. This is all higher on the edge of the field. This is swamp that I baled. I baled this whole thing them first 2 years in the drought. And it is wet right now. This would be an ideal place for somebody to build a house right about here, and then thin some of these trees out and dig a nice pond down there. It would be an awesome place. And right in here in the middle, we have a really big tree that a buddy of mine put a tree stand in a tree, and it's right on the middle of a deer highway, and it looks like a blacktop drive or blacktop road. It's just beaten down. Deer go through there all the time. The turkeys go through there all the time. But that's what I'm looking to sell. And the idea is to sell that and pay off my $6,400 and a bunch of other loans and get rid of that debt. And I have 2 people that are interested in it. And I'm going to, whoever buys it, I'm going to give them, if I ever decide to sell this, first right of refusal to buy this. If I ever decide to sell it, if I can buy this 40 acres here or 35, you know, that's kind of what's going on there. But anyways, that's my little story about the tree accident. So comment, rate, subscribe, stay tuned for more. Hope you guys enjoyed this little story. Hope some people learned something from it, or at least got a laugh out of it. I can look back and laugh now. I'm not 6 feet under, so it just changes the way you think a little bit. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.